Mammoths were among the most impressive animals ever to walk on Earth. They belonged to the same family as modern elephants and shared many similar features, such as their large bodies, long trunks, and strong legs. However, mammoths were specially adapted to survive in the cold conditions of the Ice Age. Their bodies were covered with a thick layer of shaggy fur that protected them from freezing temperatures. Beneath their fur was a layer of fat that helped keep them warm during long, harsh winters. One of the most recognizable features of mammoths was their enormous curved tusks, which could grow several meters long. These tusks were used for digging through snow to find food, defending themselves from predators, and competing with other mammoths. Their long trunks helped them gather grasses, leaves, and other plants, making it easier to survive in their challenging environment. Mammoths lived in herds, much like modern elephants do today. These herds were usually led by experienced females who guided the group in search of food and water. Young mammoths stayed close to their mothers and learned important survival skills from the older members of the herd. Living in groups provided protection and increased their chances of surviving the difficult conditions of the Ice Age. Some species of mammoths could grow up to 4 meters tall at the shoulder and weigh as much as 10 tons, making them some of the largest land mammals of their time. Their strength, intelligence, and ability to adapt allowed them to thrive across vast regions of Europe, Asia, and North America for hundreds of thousands of years. Fossils discovered by scientists have revealed valuable information about their appearance, behavior, and way of life, helping us understand these remarkable creatures in greater detail. Mammoths were not only giant animals of the Ice Age, but also key members of the ecosystems in which they lived. Their daily activities influenced the landscape, plant life, and many other animal species around them. Because of their large size and constant movement across vast territories, mammoths helped shape the environment in ways that benefited numerous forms of life. One of the most important roles mammoths played was maintaining the grassland ecosystems, known as mammoth steppes. These extensive plains were covered with grasses, herbs, and small shrubs. As mammoths grazed, they prevented certain plants from growing excessively and helped maintain open habitats. Their feeding habits reduced the spread of dense forests and encouraged the growth of grasses that supported a variety of other herbivores. Mammoths also acted as natural landscapers. As they walked across the land, their massive weight pressed seeds into the soil, helping plants spread to new areas. Their movement created pathways that other animals could use when traveling across the grasslands. These trails often became important routes for smaller animals seeking food, water, or shelter. Their feeding behavior had a significant impact on vegetation patterns. Mammoths use their trunks and tusks to pull down branches, uproot small plants, and remove snow-covering vegetation. This activity altered the structure of plant communities and created opportunities for new plants to grow. By constantly interacting with their environment, they helped maintain a diverse and balanced ecosystem. The waste produced by mammoths also contributed to the health of the landscape. Their dung contained nutrients that enriched the soil and supported plant growth. It also carried seeds from one location to another, helping various plant species spread over large distances. In this way, mammoths played a role in nutrient cycling, a process that is essential for maintaining healthy ecosystems. Many other animals indirectly benefited from the presence of mammoths. Grazing animals shared the open grasslands that mammoths helped maintain, while predators often followed herds because young, weak, or injured mammoths could become potential prey. Scavengers also relied on mammoth carcasses as a valuable food source. When a mammoth died, its body provided nourishment for numerous animals and microorganisms, supporting life throughout the ecosystem. Mammoths influenced the environment in ways that may have even affected local climate conditions. By trampling snow and vegetation, they helped expose the ground to colder temperatures during winter. Some scientists believe that large herds of mammoths contributed to maintaining the open grassland habitats that characterized much of the Ice Age landscape. Their presence helped prevent the rapid expansion of forests and supported ecosystems adapted to colder conditions. The disappearance of mammoths likely caused significant changes in the environments they once inhabited. Without these giant herbivores to manage vegetation and distribute nutrients, ecosystems gradually transformed. Grasslands in many regions gave way to forests and different plant communities, altering habitats for countless other species. Because of their size, behavior, and influence on the landscape, mammoths are often considered a keystone species, meaning they had a disproportionately large impact on their environment compared to their numbers. Their activities affected plants, animals, soil conditions, and ecological processes across enormous areas, making them one of the most important species of the Ice Age world. One of the most significant challenges faced by mammoths was the dramatic climate change that occurred at the end of the Ice Age. For thousands of years, mammoths had thrived in cold, open grasslands that stretched across large parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. These environments provided the conditions and food resources they needed to survive. However, as the Earth's climate gradually warmed, the world around them began to change in ways that made survival increasingly difficult. The end of the Ice Age brought rising temperatures and the melting of massive glaciers. Regions that had once been covered by cold, dry grasslands slowly transformed into forests, wetlands, and other types of habitats. The vast mammoth steppes that had supported large herds for generations began to shrink. As these open landscapes disappeared, mammoths lost much of the territory where they could find food and move freely. Mammoths depended heavily on grasses, sedges, herbs, and other low-growing plants. Their digestive systems and feeding habits were adapted specifically for consuming large quantities of this vegetation. As forests expanded, many of the grasslands were replaced by trees and dense shrubs. This reduced the availability of the plants that mammoths relied upon and forced them to search farther for food. Changes in rainfall patterns also affected the ecosystems where mammoths lived. Some regions became wetter, leading to the growth of forests and marshes, while others experienced shifts in seasonal conditions. These environmental changes altered the distribution of plant species and reduced the amount of suitable grazing land available to mammoth populations. The loss of habitat caused mammoth herds to become increasingly isolated from one another. In the past, large populations could roam across vast connected landscapes. As suitable habitats shrank and became fragmented, groups of mammoths were often separated by forests, mountains, rivers, or other barriers. This isolation made it more difficult for populations to interact, reproduce, and maintain healthy genetic diversity. Food shortages became a growing problem as environmental conditions continued to change. Mammoths required enormous amounts of vegetation each day to sustain their massive bodies. When grasslands became less abundant, finding enough food became more challenging, especially during harsh winters. Malnutrition and reduced access to resources likely weakened some populations and made them more vulnerable to other threats. Young mammoths were particularly affected by these changing conditions. Calves depended on healthy mothers and reliable food supplies for survival. When resources became scarce, the chances of young mammoths surviving to adulthood may have decreased. Over time, lower survival rates contributed to declining population numbers. Scientists have studied fossil remains, ancient pollen, and preserved plant materials to better understand how changing climates affected mammoths. Evidence suggests that the transformation of Ice Age grasslands into different ecosystems occurred over thousands of years, creating a long-term environmental challenge. Unlike sudden natural disasters, this gradual change continuously reduced the resources available to mammoths generation after generation. As temperatures continued to rise, the areas capable of supporting mammoth populations became smaller and more limited. Some groups survived in isolated regions for thousands of years after most mammoths had disappeared, but even these refuges eventually became unsuitable. The combination of shrinking habitats, declining food sources, environmental fragmentation, and increasing ecological pressures placed enormous strain on mammoth populations throughout their final centuries. One of the most important environmental changes that affected mammoths was the gradual expansion of forests across regions that had once been dominated by open grasslands. During the Ice Age, vast areas of the northern hemisphere were covered by cold, dry plains known as mammoth steppes. These grasslands stretched across Europe, Asia, and North America and provided an ideal habitat for mammoths and many other grazing animals. The abundance of grasses, herbs, and low-growing plants supplied the enormous amounts of food mammoths needed each day. As the climate warmed at the end of the Ice Age, these open landscapes began to change. Higher temperatures created conditions that allowed trees and shrubs to grow in areas where they had previously struggled to survive. Over time, forests started spreading into the grasslands, gradually transforming the environment that mammoths had depended upon for thousands of years. This change had a direct impact on the availability of food. Mammoths were primarily grazers, meaning they fed mostly on grasses and similar vegetation. Their teeth, digestive systems, and feeding habits were specially adapted for processing large quantities of tough grassland plants. As forests expanded, grass-covered areas became smaller, reducing the amount of suitable food available. Although some vegetation remained, it was often different from the plants mammoths were best adapted to eat. The transformation of open plains into forests also affected the way mammoths moved across the landscape. Mammoths were large animals that thrived in wide, open spaces where they could travel freely in search of food and water. Dense forests created obstacles that limited their movement and reduced access to grazing areas. Herds that once migrated across vast territories found themselves confined to smaller and more fragmented habitats. Forests also altered the ecological balance of the regions where mammoths lived. Many other grazing animals that shared the grasslands faced similar challenges as their habitats changed. Species adapted to open environments declined, while animals better suited to forested landscapes became more common. This shift changed the composition of ecosystems and reduced the dominance of the grassland communities that had supported mammoths for so long. Seasonal survival became more difficult as forests expanded. During winter, mammoths often used their powerful tusks to sweep away snow and uncover grasses beneath. In forested areas, thick vegetation, fallen branches, and different ground conditions made accessing food more challenging. The reduction of open grazing land increased competition for resources and placed additional stress on mammoth populations. The spread of forests also contributed to the isolation of mammoth herds. Large, connected grasslands once allowed different populations to interact and mix. As forests divided these habitats into smaller patches, mammoth groups became separated from one another. Isolated populations often had fewer opportunities to find mates, exchange genetic diversity, and maintain healthy population sizes. Scientists studying ancient pollen preserved in lake sediments and soil samples have found strong evidence of these environmental changes. Their research shows that as temperatures rose, tree species such as birch, pine, and spruce expanded into regions that had previously been open grasslands. These findings help explain how the gradual replacement of mammoth steppes by forests significantly altered the habitats that mammoths relied upon. For mammoths, the expansion of forests represented more than a simple change in scenery. It meant the loss of familiar feeding grounds, reduced mobility, increasing habitat fragmentation, greater competition for resources, and a steady decline in the environmental conditions that had supported their survival throughout much of the Ice Age. While climate change was transforming the mammoth's environment, another powerful factor was also affecting their survival: the growing presence of humans. As human populations expanded across Europe, Asia, and North America, they increasingly came into contact with mammoth herds. Early humans were highly adaptable and resourceful hunters who depended on animals for food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Among the many animals they hunted, mammoths were one of the largest and most valuable sources of resources. For prehistoric humans, a single mammoth could provide an enormous amount of meat capable of feeding a group for an extended period. In harsh Ice Age environments, where food was often difficult to obtain, such a large source of nourishment was extremely valuable. Mammoths also supplied fat, which was an important source of energy during cold winters. Every successful hunt could greatly improve a community's chances of survival. The usefulness of mammoths extended far beyond food. Their thick hides were used to make clothing, blankets, and coverings for shelters. Their bones could be fashioned into tools, weapons, and structural supports for dwellings. Mammoth tusks, made of ivory, were used to create spear points, carvings, needles, and various everyday objects. Because nearly every part of the animal had a practical purpose, mammoths became an important resource for many human groups. As human hunting techniques improved, mammoths faced increasing danger. Early hunters developed specialized tools such as stone-tipped spears, throwing weapons, and coordinated hunting strategies. Rather than relying on individual strength, humans worked together in groups, allowing them to target animals much larger than themselves. Cooperation, planning, and communication made humans highly effective predators. Evidence from archaeological sites shows that humans hunted mammoths in various ways. Some groups may have driven mammoths into natural traps such as cliffs, steep ravines, muddy ground, or frozen lakes. Others likely surrounded herds and focused on vulnerable individuals such as young, elderly, or injured animals. These hunting methods increased the chances of success while reducing risks to the hunters. The impact of hunting became especially significant as mammoth populations were already declining due to environmental changes. In large, healthy populations, occasional hunting might not have caused major problems. However, when habitats were shrinking and food resources were becoming less abundant, the loss of even a small number of individuals each year could have serious consequences. Every adult mammoth removed from a population represented not only a loss of an individual animal, but also a reduction in future breeding potential. Female mammoths played a particularly important role in herd survival. Like modern elephants, mammoths had relatively long pregnancies and produced offspring infrequently. This meant that populations recovered slowly from losses. If hunting reduced the number of breeding females, population growth could decline significantly. Over time, repeated losses became increasingly difficult to replace. Small and isolated mammoth populations were especially vulnerable. As herds became fragmented due to environmental changes, hunting pressure could have a greater impact on local groups. A population that might have survived natural challenges could be pushed closer to extinction when additional hunting losses were added. In some regions, this combination of factors likely accelerated the decline of mammoth numbers. Archaeologists have discovered numerous sites containing mammoth bones alongside human tools and evidence of butchering. Cut marks on bones, stone spear points, and remains of mammoth-based structures provide strong evidence that humans regularly interacted with and utilized these animals. These discoveries help researchers understand the relationship between humans and mammoths during the final stages of the Ice Age. The debate among scientists continues regarding exactly how much hunting contributed to mammoth extinction. Some researchers emphasize climate change as the primary cause, while others argue that human hunting played a major role. Many believe that the extinction resulted from a combination of both factors. As mammoths struggled with shrinking habitats, changing ecosystems, and food shortages, continued hunting pressure added another challenge that made long-term survival increasingly difficult. The extinction of the mammoths did not happen suddenly. It was a long and gradual process that unfolded over thousands of years. Rather than disappearing in a single catastrophic event, mammoth populations slowly decreased generation after generation. This decline was influenced by a combination of environmental changes, shrinking habitats, reduced food supplies, and increasing pressure from human hunting. Each of these factors contributed to a steady reduction in their numbers, making recovery more difficult as time passed. During the height of the Ice Age, mammoths existed in large populations spread across vast regions of Europe, Asia, and North America. Their extensive range allowed different herds to interact, migrate, and maintain healthy population levels. Large populations are generally more resilient because they contain greater genetic diversity and have a better ability to withstand environmental challenges. However, as the climate changed and suitable habitats became smaller, these advantages began to disappear. The loss of grasslands forced mammoth herds into increasingly isolated areas. Instead of occupying one continuous landscape, populations became divided into smaller groups separated by forests, mountains, rivers, and other natural barriers. This fragmentation reduced contact between herds and limited opportunities for breeding among different populations. Over time, isolated groups became more vulnerable to local environmental changes and unexpected events. Population growth in mammoths was naturally slow. Like modern elephants, mammoths had long pregnancies and produced relatively few offspring during their lifetimes. A female mammoth typically gave birth to one calf at a time and invested considerable care in raising her young. Because calves depended on their mothers for several years, the interval between births was often quite long. This meant that mammoth populations could not quickly replace individuals lost to disease, starvation, accidents, predators, or hunting. As food resources became scarcer, survival rates among young mammoths likely decreased. Calves required significant nourishment to grow and develop properly. During times of environmental stress, mothers may have struggled to obtain enough food to support themselves and their offspring. Weaker calves faced greater risks from harsh weather, malnutrition, and other dangers, reducing the number that survived to adulthood. Adult mammoths also faced increasing challenges. Older individuals often found it harder to travel long distances in search of food, while younger adults had to compete for limited resources. As suitable habitats continued shrinking, competition within and between herds may have intensified. This additional stress affected the overall health and stability of mammoth populations. Another important factor was the reduction of genetic diversity. When populations become small and isolated, breeding opportunities decrease, leading to a narrower gene pool. Lower genetic diversity can make species more vulnerable to diseases, birth defects, and environmental changes. Scientific studies of mammoth DNA suggest that some of the last surviving populations experience signs of reduced genetic health, indicating that isolation may have weakened their ability to adapt to new challenges. Natural disasters and extreme weather events may have further accelerated population declines. Severe winters, Droughts, floods, or sudden changes in local conditions could have devastating effects on already struggling herds. In large populations, losses from such events might be absorbed over time, but in small populations, even a single disaster could remove a significant percentage of individuals. Evidence from fossils and ancient DNA shows that mammoth populations became increasingly fragmented as time went on. Regions that once supported thousands of mammoths gradually lost their herds, leaving only a few isolated groups. Some populations survived much longer than others, particularly in remote locations where environmental conditions remained favorable. However, even these remaining groups continued to shrink over successive generations. The decline of mammoth numbers was therefore not the result of a single cause or a single moment. It was a prolonged process marked by decreasing population sizes, lower birth rates, reduced survival among young animals, habitat fragmentation, genetic challenges, and ongoing environmental pressures. With each passing generation, the number of mammoths became smaller, their populations more isolated, and their chances of long-term survival increasingly uncertain. The story of the mammoths provides one of the clearest examples of how environmental changes can influence the survival of wildlife. Throughout Earth's history, animals have depended on stable habitats, reliable food sources, suitable climates, and healthy ecosystems. When these conditions change significantly, species must adapt, migrate, or face the risk of decline. The experience of the mammoths demonstrates how even large, powerful, and successful animals can struggle when their environment changes faster than they can respond. During the Ice Age, mammoths lived in a world that was very different from the one we know today. Vast grasslands covered enormous areas of the northern hemisphere, creating ideal conditions for large grazing animals. These grasslands provided abundant food, open spaces for movement, and habitats that supported many different species. For thousands of years, mammoths thrived in this environment because their physical characteristics and behaviors were perfectly suited to the conditions around them. However, environmental conditions are not permanent. As the Earth's climate gradually warmed, temperatures increased, glaciers melted, and ecosystems began to transform. These changes affected the availability of resources that mammoths depended upon. The grasslands that once stretched across continents slowly gave way to forests, wetlands, and other habitats. As a result, mammoths lost much of the environment that had supported them for countless generations. One of the most important lessons from the mammoth story is that wildlife is closely connected to its habitat. Every species relies on specific environmental conditions to survive. Some animals require certain temperatures, while others depend on particular plants, water sources, or shelter. When these essential elements change or disappear, species may find it difficult to continue living in the same area. Mammoths were adapted for open, cold grasslands, and when those habitats declined, their chances of survival decreased as well. Environmental change can also affect food availability. Mammoths consumed large amounts of grasses and other low-growing vegetation every day. As forests expanded and grasslands shrank, food became harder to find. This demonstrates how changes in vegetation can have a direct impact on animal populations. If food resources become limited, animals may experience lower birth rates, reduced survival among young individuals, and increased competition for resources. Another important aspect of environmental change is habitat fragmentation. As suitable environments become smaller and more isolated, animal populations can become separated from one another. This isolation can reduce breeding opportunities and limit genetic diversity. Mammoth populations that were once connected across vast landscapes gradually became divided into smaller groups. Similar challenges affect many modern species when roads, cities, agriculture, and other human activities break large habitats into smaller pieces. The mammoth's decline also illustrates how multiple environmental pressures can interact. Climate change alone may not always cause extinction, but when combined with habitat loss, food shortages, disease, competition, or human activities, the effects can become much more severe. In the case of mammoths, changing climates and shrinking habitats likely made populations more vulnerable to additional challenges. This combination of pressures increased the difficulty of long-term survival. Scientists often study mammoths to understand how ecosystems respond to environmental shifts. Fossils, preserved remains, pollen records, and ancient DNA provide valuable information about past climates and wildlife populations. By examining these records, researchers can learn how species reacted to changing conditions and identify patterns that may help explain similar processes occurring today. The story of the mammoths is especially relevant because environmental changes continue to affect wildlife around the world. Many species currently face challenges related to changing climates, habitat destruction, shifting ecosystems, and declining food resources. Polar bears, Arctic foxes, coral reef organisms, and countless other species are experiencing pressures that, in some ways, resemble the environmental challenges faced by mammoths thousands of years ago. The mammoth's history demonstrates that ecosystems are interconnected and that changes in climate, vegetation, and habitat can have far-reaching consequences for wildlife. It highlights the importance of understanding environmental processes, monitoring changes in ecosystems, and recognizing how species depend on the conditions around them. Through the rise and decline of the mammoths, scientists gain a deeper understanding of the powerful influence that environmental change can have on the survival, distribution, and long-term future of animal populations across the world. The extinction of the mammoths is more than just an event from the distant past. It is a powerful lesson about the importance of conservation and the need to protect endangered species. By studying what happened to mammoths, scientists and conservationists can better understand the challenges that wildlife faces and how human actions can influence the survival of entire species. The story of the mammoths reminds us that extinction is permanent and that once a species disappears, it can never truly return to its natural place in the world. Mammoths were among the most successful animals of the Ice Age. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years, adapted to harsh environments, and spread across vast regions of the Earth. Yet despite their strength and resilience, they eventually disappeared. Their extinction shows that no species, regardless of how powerful or widespread it may be, is completely safe from environmental pressures and changing conditions. One of the most important lessons from the mammoth's decline is the value of preserving natural habitats. Animals depend on healthy ecosystems for food, shelter, breeding grounds, and protection. When habitats are damaged or destroyed, wildlife often struggles to survive. The shrinking grasslands that mammoths depended upon contributed to their decline, demonstrating how the loss of suitable environments can place species at risk. Today, many animals face similar threats as forests are cleared, wetlands are drained, and natural landscapes are transformed by human development. The mammoth story also highlights the importance of maintaining biodiversity. Biodiversity refers to the variety of living organisms within an ecosystem. Every species plays a unique role in maintaining ecological balance. When a species disappears, the effects can extend throughout the entire ecosystem. Mammoths influenced vegetation, soil health, and the structure of Ice Age environments. Their extinction likely altered ecological relationships that had existed for thousands of years. This demonstrates how the loss of a single species can affect many others. Another important lesson involves the impact of human activities on wildlife. While scientists continue to debate the exact role of hunting in mammoth extinction, there is strong evidence that human actions contributed to the pressures they faced. Today, human activities continue to affect wildlife through habitat destruction, pollution, overhunting, illegal wildlife trade, and climate change. The mammoth's history serves as a reminder that human decisions can have long-lasting consequences for the natural world. Conservation efforts are designed to prevent the kinds of declines that led to the disappearance of species like the mammoth. Around the world, governments, organizations, scientists, and local communities work together to protect endangered animals and their habitats. National parks, wildlife reserves, breeding programs, habitat restoration projects, and environmental laws all play important roles in preserving biodiversity and reducing extinction risks. The study of mammoths has also improved scientific understanding of extinction processes. Researchers examine fossils, preserved remains, and genetic evidence to learn how populations decline and what factors increase vulnerability. This knowledge helps conservationists identify warning signs in modern species before populations become too small to recover. By recognizing these patterns early, it becomes possible to take action before extinction occurs. Many animals alive today face challenges that resemble those experienced by mammoths. Species such as elephants, rhinos, tigers, orangutans, sea turtles, and numerous others are threatened by habitat loss, climate change, and human activities. Their situations demonstrate that extinction is not only a problem of the past, but also a continuing concern in the present. Learning from the mammoths encourages greater awareness of the risks facing modern wildlife. Education is another important aspect of conservation. The story of the mammoths helps people understand the consequences of environmental change and the importance of protecting nature. By learning about extinct species, individuals gain a greater appreciation for the diversity of life on Earth and the need to safeguard it for future generations. Knowledge can inspire responsible actions that support environmental protection and wildlife conservation. The extinction of the mammoths also encourages long-term thinking. Environmental changes often occur gradually, and the effects may not be immediately visible. Mammoth populations declined over thousands of years before the species finally disappeared. This teaches us that conservation requires ongoing effort, planning, and commitment. Protecting wildlife is not a single action but a continuous process of monitoring ecosystems, reducing threats, and maintaining healthy environments where species can thrive. The legacy of the mammoths remains a powerful reminder of the importance of stewardship and responsibility toward the natural world. Their disappearance illustrates the consequences of failing to protect vulnerable species and highlights the value of conservation efforts aimed at ensuring that the rich diversity of life on Earth continues to survive in the face of environmental challenges and changing conditions.